Our first guest tonight is Miss Jackie Carpenter. Welcome to Nightline, Jackie.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Now, you've got a story to tell that's unreal, and I'm not even going to just try to even lead into it because I won't do it justice. Why don't you just start at the beginning, maybe a little before the beginning of what all happened?
Well, you know, if anyone could say they had a perfect life, I really feel like my life was perfect in the aspect that I didn't have anything keeping me awake at night. You know, I have a wonderful husband, 2 sons. I mean, life was just really good, you know, going good. I've been a Christian. I was saved when I was 13. So I've always been in church.
Right.
But you know, sometimes, you know, you think you have faith, and you think you have faith that can withstand anything. But sometimes that's because it hadn't just had to stand anything, you know. And so when this happened to us, and our world was completely rocked and turned upside down, what I found, Dante, is that the faith that I possessed was not strong enough to turn me right side up. And so that's where my journey in the Georgia Justice, my journey to faith began, bottom side up. But what happened was, like I said, I have 2 sons, both grown. My oldest son is a pastor of my church. I go to his church. He's my pastor. But my youngest son, he was called to preach December of '07. But 6 months after that is when all of this tragedy took place. Jason also was a home builder, my youngest son. He was 28 years old. He had a beautiful wife, 6-year-old little boy. Just a little perfect family, you know, serving the Lord, working hard on these houses, just, you know, just a normal life.
Right.
But copper theft was overtaking my son. And all of these homes that he was building, copper thieves would literally go in there, rip out the copper, which is exposed copper to refrigerator lines, air conditioner lines, and they would rip it out and probably not get over $50 for it, but the damage done would cost him like $6,000, Paul, to go in there and fix this house back up and get it back on the market. So it was killing my son. I mean, June 28th of '08 is when this happened. And during the course of that week, from Monday to Friday, he had already been robbed 3 times. And a total of 17.
Yeah.
But just in that 1 week, 3.
And every time it totaled about $6,000 in damages.
Yeah. And that day, he went, I think he'd filed so many insurance claims, and I'm thinking on this day he did go to the police department, and they said they would send someone out to the site to meet him that afternoon. I know they showed up that afternoon out there to meet him. It was the deputy. And he came out there to meet my son at the site to give him some advice on how to handle these thefts. But what he gave my son was very bad advice. But when you haven't gotten any advice, you just kind of soak up whatever you're getting. But what he told my son, literally, Dante, was that they did not have manpower to watch these houses. And it's not just my son. Anybody with copper theft, law enforcement cannot watch it 24 hours a day.
Right.
And you've got to catch them in the act. So, you know, what he was literally telling my son was, I suggest you do this. I suggest that you hide in the woods with the next house with exposed copper. That's where they met. I suggest you hide in the woods, watch the house, and if they show back up, just call 911 and they'll be here in just a matter of minutes, because I am going to alert law enforcement you're doing this. They're going to be patrolling this area, and all you do is call and they can be here in a matter of minutes. Well, you know, Dante, I didn't like that. I don't like the idea of my son sitting out there in the woods having to do the police job. But I didn't like the idea of these thieves coming back taking more either. And you know, it's like the lesser of the 2 evils. So, you know, but I got to tell you both this. Nobody thought in our family they'd show back up a 4th time. This was just going to be for Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And on Monday, he already lined up a full-time security guard. He wouldn't have to do this anymore. This was just in case. But nobody thought they would show back up. Or I would have been there. Somebody would have been there. But he was in the woods, about half asleep, and at 1 o'clock in the morning, a van came by. And it woke him up. And as he got up, he saw the brake lights at the end of the road, and he thought, oh my goodness, they're turning around. And they did. They turned around and they came back, but they went on by, and he started breathing normally when he saw their brake lights again. And they came back, and they turned right into this driveway where he's sitting. And the way they pulled into this yard, their headlights, the way they come on in front of the house, the headlights were directly on him in the woods. And he just knew that he'd been seen.
Right.
He just knew that. But he fell off this bucket. He called 911 like he told him to do. And then, after he called 911, he was scared to death. He was even whispering. When we heard the 911 tapes in court, you could hear him whispering. But after he did that, he called his father-in-law, who lives about 10 minutes away, who knew Jason was doing this too. And he called the father-in-law and he said, "Billy, they're back." And Billy said, "Jason, do you want me to come over there?" And he said, "I am very scared." Billy said, "Okay, I'm coming over there." He said, "The police are on their way." And Billy said, "I'm coming over here." So he did come over there. But see, little did my son know that this deputy who gave him this wonderful advice, this deputy never informed law enforcement my son was going to be hiding in the woods. There was no law enforcement anywhere near the area. When they did get in touch with him, they were on the other side of town. They got lost trying to find this subdivision. But let me tell you everything I'm about to tell you happened in 12, I think it was like somewhere between 12 and 13 minutes. So that's just how fast all this happened, okay? What happened was the father-in-law arrived first because there were no police. Okay, so the father-in-law arrived and he pulled in behind this van. It's 1 o'clock in the morning. It's pitch black. Jason has a double-barrel shotgun. And he's watching this from the woods, and he sees the father-in-law pull in behind the van.
Now, but when he gets here, was the thieves, they were in the house?
No, they're still in the van. Nobody's gotten out of the van.
Okay, nobody's gotten out of the van.
Pitch black van sitting there. But Billy gets out of his truck, and he does not even own a gun, and Jason knew that. All he had was a flashlight. And he walked up to the passenger side of that van. And Jason couldn't just sit there watching this father-in-law get shot.
Yeah.
So he comes out of the woods, he fired a warning shot into the air. And he came on out of the woods, and he approached the other side of the van. So Jason and the father-in-law opened the van and started ordering the men out. The two up front were totally cooperative. They got out. Jason explained to them, the police were on their way. I've had numerous thefts. I don't want to hurt you. All I want to do is tie up your hands and your feet, and you're going to stay right here until the police get here.
Right.
And they totally cooperated. However, they could still see, Jason could still see shadows in the back of the van. Billy had walked these other two on over. They were going to lay down, let him tie. But Jason could still see shadows in the van. He knew there was somebody else in that van and didn't know if they had guns or whatever. So he kept telling them, "Please come out. I'm not going to hurt you. Just come out. You've got to come out of the van." And after a little bit, he did come out. Jason said it was probably a matter of 2 to 3 minutes. He finally come out, but he came out totally rebellious. He was illegal. They were illegals. But I don't know if when Jason said the police are on their way, it scared him so bad. Maybe the rebellion kicked in because of that. We'll never know that. Right. We'll never know. We can just second guess it all we want to. I have tried to 1,000 times. Why? Why didn't he just do like the others? Why did he do, because even the other two men was telling him, just do what he tells you, just do what he, but he was just rebellious. But he did go over and he did lay down on the other side. So they had him laying down, and Billy, the father-in-law, was standing in front of the rebellious guy with just his little flashlight. So Jason comes back over to tie this first man. But when he did that, he looked, and because the flashlight was on that guy, he saw him getting up. And Jason knew he was either going for a gun, he was going for something, he was going for the father-in-law. So Jason could not just watch this. So he grabbed his gun that he'd thrown down.
Did any of the guys, they didn't have guns, but,
No.
but it was dark and he didn't know
not that they knew, because they didn't pat him down.
Right.
They were just trying to get them down on the ground so they could
Exactly.
tie their hands and feet. But no, they did not. But they had no clue what any of them had.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
anyway, Jason just grabbed the gun and he went back over to the guy that's getting up, to the father-in-law, and he took the gun like you would a stick. And he pushed him down with it. But when he pushed him, they said that the gun had it was an old shotgun. It had been up on a shelf forever. It had a hair trigger. And they said with even the slightest brush that it could have caused that gun to have fired. But Jason, you know, he knew how he was holding the gun. He said, Mama, I had one hand on that barrel, one on the stock, nowhere near a trigger. And that was proven in court the way he was holding it, because they had done the projections down to just the decimeter or whatever. But anyway, when he pushed this man down, the gun fired. And everything changed, you know, and he called 911 again, and he said, send an ambulance. And she said, the police are on their way. Still no police. Send an ambulance. And so Jason and this 911 operator are trying to save this man, but they're not getting anywhere. So Billy and Jason get this man up. They put him in Billy's truck, and he takes him to the hospital. And the man, in the early morning hours, he passes away. Yeah. Now, me at home, I'm 2 hours south of all this. And I had gotten a call at 2 o'clock in the morning, my daddy saying, Jackie, Jason was down there at that site. They showed back up. There was an accident. The gun misfired. One has been shot, but I think he's going to be all right. Billy's taking him to the hospital. Me and your mama are going to the hospital. Just don't come up here yet. Let me find out what's going on. So, you know, I'm laying on my living room sofa with a cell phone in my hand, and we got this circle of calls going around to each other. Have you heard anything? Have you heard anything? My oldest son, who's a pastor, we're all in this loop. But somewhere in the early morning hours, I guess I must have just went sound asleep, because at 7 o'clock the phone rang, and when I answered it, it was my Stephanie, my little daughter-in-law, Jason's wife, and she's screaming into the phone and telling me, Miss Jackie, that man died, and they've arrested Jason for felony murder, and they may arrest my daddy also, and Miss Jackie, I mean, she's just terrified and screaming, and you know, that's when our whole world was rocked, upside down. Out of the blue, tragedy struck. Out of the blue, you know, just a head-on collision. And, you know, my first thoughts when I started trying, you know, I have said this, why is it when we need to think the clearest is when we're the most confused? You know, is that not the truth?
That's the truth, yeah.
You know, you're just in this fog, and you need to think straight, and you can't think straight.
Do it, no.
And it's like people are talking to you, but you really don't have a clue what they're saying to you, because your mind is in a different world. I lived that way for 10 months. 10 months I lived with people talking to me in my mind in this different world, just trying to figure out what's going on. Because, you know, you start thinking, oh, God, this thing could have been stopped at so many fronts. Number one, you know, the deputy didn't have to tell my son he needed to do this himself. Right. You know, the police did not have to get lost. Right. The gun did not have to misfire. The guy didn't have to die. I mean, it could have been stopped, but it wasn't stopped, and it was coming full circle. But you know, I kept thinking, you know, see, what happened is this deputy in the early morning hours, once the man passed away and the deputy got wind that the man died, what the deputy did, realizing his advice had gone south on him, he runs up to the judge's office and says this, I met him there this afternoon at 3 o'clock. And he was in a rage over all these copper thefts, and he just wanted to kill somebody. I never told him to hide in the woods. I never told him to have a gun down there. I never told him to make a citizen's arrest, which is what he had told him to do while they were trying to bind their hands and feet. I never told him any of this stuff. So see, what happened was, because we couldn't say anything, you know, the attorney, bless his heart, the only attorney we had was the real estate attorney from Jason's closings, from these houses he was selling. No, we didn't know how you even find an attorney. Yeah. So all we had was him, you know. But in his office, he came across the table at me and he said, you talk to nobody. If you say anything to any person, you're going to send your son to prison for 30 years. So from that minute on, and that was within hours from this thing, from the get-go, we were under gag orders. But that did not stop what was going out in the newspapers.
Right, right.
My son was across the headlines.
And you couldn't defend him.
Murderer.
Yeah.
Jason charged with murder, felony murder.
Right.
And then it goes on, and the only thing they're printing is what they're getting from this deputy side and this prosecutor side, and we're under, and the blogging. Oh, Dante. The blogging was just horrific. Yeah. So see, what was happening is my son was being tried and convicted through the court of public opinion. Mm-hmm. And it almost got dangerous on my son and his family. Right. Because my son was in cell block A, where they put the murderers. Pitiful, pitiful, pitiful. And when I went in to see him for the first time, I had to look at him through a glass. He'd been interrogated all night. And me and my husband and Stephanie, looking at him through this glass, when they brought him in, he didn't even look like my son. and he sat down. He had on red and white stripes, which they make them wear in cell block A. That means they're murderers. They have them in different pods, cell blocks, and red and white's murderers, worst of the worst. So there he is. And he comes in, bless his heart, and he sits down, and all I want to do is just reach through that glass and put my arms around him and hold him,
Right.
and I can't do anything. It was the first time in my life I realized I can't touch my child. This is out of my control.
As a parent, and Paul, you're a parent too, that's got to be awful.
It's where I bottomed out as a
Knowing that
mama.
you can't do anything to help them.
You can't. And all you know what they've been through. But all I can do is look at him, and it's just me and him, eye to eye, and tears streaming down his face. And he's saying, Mama, and he's got that little hand up there, Mama, this was an accident. Mama, I didn't mean this to happen. Mama, I couldn't handle it. I just started bottoming out as a mama. And when I think back on it now, I don't even know how I survived to get up out of that place. Yeah. And then you hear all these big doors slamming, and it was the worst thing. And then, again, you're trying to deal with life and that in your mind going on. But then he'd been in there for 3 days, and I got a phone call from him at work. What I started living for was my phone calls from that jail. Mm-hmm. Just a phone call to know he was all right.
Now, were you working at the time?
Oh, yeah, I was working. Yeah, I was working with my husband. And it was about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and the phone rang, and it was him. And he was doing pretty good holding up, because I done told him, Jason, move your life into your Bible, because he was called to preach. Just move into it, baby. Just move your life in there. And he did. But on this afternoon, he called me screaming. When I picked up the phone, he was having a meltdown, and he was like, Mama, get me out. Mama, I can't stay here another day. Mama, you got to get me out. And all I could hear in the background was prisoners fighting and cussing and screaming, and I knew his life was in danger. And so what do? Dante, I called the attorney. Yeah. I said, do something. And again, this is what they tell you. Jackie, you can't do anything. Yeah. I'm sorry. Get a hold of yourself. Get a hold of myself. Get a hold of myself. My son is in prison, and he don't need to be there. The little 9-year-old boys won't know when Daddy's coming home. Why is he still there? And you can't get any straight answers, So he was in there 9 days. But let me tell you, I fully believe the only way we got him out on bail was he started witnessing in the cell block A to the prisoners. He started studying his Bible in prisoners, and the first prisoner come by and said, what are you reading? He said, I'm reading my Bible. Well, tell me about this Jesus. Yeah. So Jason started telling him about Jesus, and he accepted the Lord. The next day, him and this prisoner are studying. Another one comes by. What are you reading? We're studying the Bible. Well, tell me about God. He got saved. After the third one got saved was on the very day of our bond hearing. And I said, it's like Satan himself opened that door and just threw my son out, because all of them were coming. They were going to start a prayer meeting in the cell block A. Right. That's when they threw Jason out. Yeah, but after the third one, and all these mamas that call me crying now, like tonight, I'll probably start getting some phone calls. I get a lot of them after a TV interview. Mamas whose sons are incarcerated. Right. They don't know what to do. They're beside themselves. And the first thing I always ask them, is he saved? And you know what they always say for the most part? They are. And I say, well, listen, you tell them that this Bible is their meal ticket out of there. Mm-hmm. Because if they will start witnessing to all of those prisoners around them, when those prisoners start accepting God, Satan himself will throw your son out. That's right. But I didn't know what to tell them mamas at first. I didn't know what to tell them. God showed me. Now I see how everything happened for a reason. Right. Those three for a reason, for me to tell these mamas that now. But see, I didn't know it then. But, I never thought we'd go to a murder trial. Right. I kept thinking, surely to goodness the truth's going to emerge somewhere, Dante. You keep thinking it's going to come out somewhere. But it didn't. It never came out. So I turned myself into everything. I started trying to fix the problem. I think that's what mamas do.
Did it ever sink in that, and you're from Georgia. Mm-hmm. What part of Georgia was this?
This happened in Newnan, Georgia. It's about 30 miles south of Atlanta.
Okay. Did it ever fully sink in that the state of Georgia is trying my son for felony murder? That they think he killed this man intentionally?
Oh, I couldn't get away from it because it was in the newspapers every day. Right. There's no getting away from it, Dante. You don't get away from it at all, But let me tell you something. You realize who your friends are too, Dante. Yeah. And when that attorney came across the table at me and said, you have no friends, I thought, you got to be kidding me. I got friends. I got my friends I can talk to. I realized real fast I didn't. Because he told me, you say one thing to one person, and it is going to come back home, and it's going to hurt your son, and it can send him to prison for 30 years. But you know what? That's just another turning point. Because I realize I do have one person I can talk to. Right. I do have one friend I can talk to. I have one I can tell everything, and he's not going to tell anybody anything. Right. And, he knows this whole thing anyway. Mm-hmm. So I'm just going to talk to him. So that's what I started doing. But, you know, like I said, I started researching 25 hours a day trying to find an answer, trying to find anything that would help, because the attorneys were not giving us any hope in this.
Yeah.
Dante, it wasn't like they were saying, well, this is going to be okay when we go to court. I'm sure it's going to be fine. No, They were telling me, you better quit looking at life through them rose-colored glasses and that Bible you got, and you better start facing reality here. Yeah. That's what they were telling me. Get out of that fairy tale. That's pretty much what they were saying, you know. You better come on back down to this real earth your own. Your son's going before a jury of 12, and you just need to start bracing, because it's not a matter of whether or not he's going to prison. It's just a matter of how long is he going for.
Yeah.
I couldn't deal with that, because I knew he was innocent. I knew it was a tragic accident. Everybody, the sad part is they knew it was a tragic accident, but they went on with it as felony murder.
Right.
Because they didn't want any more builders out there who's being totally robbed day and night doing this, watching their property for themselves, trying to guard their property.
Right.
They wanted to make him an example.
That's exactly what they were hanging him out to dry. They didn't care that he had a young wife, a little 6-year-old. I don't know how people do. Oh, God, I don't know how people do that. But, you know, they were doing it. They were doing it. And every time I looked at the prosecutor, I saw Satan. I just saw Satan. But, you know, what I was doing, I was wearing my body out physically, because I was doing so much research. That's all I did. Mm-hmm. And I ended up in a hospital getting a blood transfusion. I know I was dying. I really felt my body was dying. I felt like it was just fading on out, you know, because I knew it couldn't take anymore. And I was just going down. But I was going down fighting, you know. Yeah. And when I went and they told me you're going to have a blood transfusion, I said, you know, I've touched on that. God had to get me to a place where I would turn off the computers, put down all the research books, and just lay flat on my back and listen to what he had to say to me. Right. Be still.
Well, everybody else was just saying lies.
That's right.
And, of course, Satan's the father of all lies, but God, he's not going to lie to you.
He's not. He's not. But, you know, I was literally physically dying, but when I was laying there, you know, it was like God, he says, be still and know that I am God. Yeah. But I think what happens, and to all the hurting people out there who are trying to find the answer, who just trying, when we're not still, and when we don't let God do his part, when I look back at it now, I was messing God up at every turn. Every time he would try to fix, I just know every time he tried to fix something, here I would come in there with my little stuff and just mess him completely up. Right. I know I was. But when I got out of that hospital and I went to get my medication at CVS Pharmacy, right there on the choice book stand was a book. And my eyes, I'm telling you, Dante, were just drawn to this book, and it was Psalm 91, God's Shield of Protection. And I knew that was my answer, and that's where God had to get me here, to get this book. And I took it home, and I just moved into my prayer closet. And, I mean, I literally started living in it. It's a sauna.
So you think that was the turning point?
Into a prayer closet. I put all my notes in there. It's where I could seclude myself, you know.
That was your turning point there. You hit rock bottom.
I died, and now Jackie, I know Jackie died, because when Jackie moved out of that hospital bed and into this prayer closet, I wasn't living under my own power anymore. I was hooked up. When I started reading that book, Psalm 91, and I started reading about how God offers us protection, I didn't know that. Right. I didn't know he had a plan of protection for our life. And when he says, I'll put angels around you to take charge over thee. Right. And when he says, you don't have to be worried about them arrows flying at you by day, and you ain't got to be worried about all that terror coming at you at night, and all that's in Georgia Justice, the second book. You don't have to be afraid, Jackie, you know, because when you're in trouble, I'll help you. That's right. How comforting is that? So I hooked up as life support. That's what got me on through all those months. And, you know, my family, you know, when tragedy strikes, Dante, it don't just happen to you. It happens to every person in your family that loves this individual. My parents, his brother. I mean, it's just all these people around me are dying. Right. And I come out of my prayer closet and I try to tell them, come on, y'all, we're claiming our miracle through Psalm 91. Because I done said, we're going to claim it. And I was sending them passages every Monday morning. I would start tearing out my passages and start copying my whole family to keep them alive, to give them hope. And I would always say, come on now, y'all, let's band together. We're going to claim this miracle. We're going to get this miracle. And we did, you know. But I don't feel like I ever got them to 100% faith.
Well, what point were you at 100%? When you knew.
You want to know?
Yeah, when
I'm
you
gonna
knew
tell
my
you.
son's going to get out of prison,
I'm
and
gonna
he's
tell
going to be
you.
set free. At
I'm
what
gonna tell you.
point?
2 weeks before 2 weeks before court, I still didn't have a clue. Okay,
Right.
2 weeks, I still didn't have a clue. I knew I was at a point that I had exhausted all my resources and I couldn't do anything else. And I was sitting in my church, little country church, and my son was preaching out of Psalms. But my mind, Dante, it just left and it went off in another direction, and I could see me. And I was crying out to God, but I was holding my son in my hands. And I said, "Dear God, I'm his mama, and as much as I love this child, I have done everything I know to do. I have done everything I know to do, and I am no further along now than I was when I started. But as much as I love him, you're his father, and you love him more, and you can fix this.
Right.
You can fix it. I can't, but you can fix it. So let me tell you what I'm going to do, God. I'm going to give him to you.
Right.
And you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to step back, and I'm not going to worry about it. I'm not going to try to get in your way anymore. I'm not going to interfere with your plan. I'm just going to step back there, and I'm going to let you have him, and your will be done."
Right.
And let me tell you something. I started feeling light from the top of my
felt
head
that relief.
to the bottom of my feet. I literally felt God take, because he was so heavy in my mind's eye, holding my son before God. He was so heavy. He was weighing me down.
Right.
I was just about to drop him when God just took him right out of my hands. And I was I was light as a feather. But you know what God just showed me just here a few months ago, and this trial's been over. Let me tell you, the trial was over in 2009. This is 11. You know what he just showed me maybe a few months ago? Jackie, you keep saying that I just took him right out of your hands and you felt it.
You let
But
him
he
go.
said, "You know what, Jackie? I had him because I heard God whisper in my left ear after he took him, it's going to be okay." I heard him whisper. He said, "Jackie, I took him in my left hand, but I still have one more hand, and you look like you needed help. So I just picked you up too."
That's wonderful.
Oh, and I knew. I said, "Oh, God, you did. That's why when I heard you had me in your right hand, because I heard you whisper in my left ear." I mean, it just all started coming right back to me, and I knew. But but I didn't realize that. I knew he took my son. I felt him take him.
Right.
I had no clue he picked me up too.
Yeah.
But I know now.
If you would have turned your son loose earlier, do you think
I
you would
could
have
have
bottomed
saved
out?
myself a lot, couldn't I? You know what? I said from the very get-go, and hindsight's 20/20, but when you look back over everything, but Dante, let's just take back to when this thing first happened.
Yeah.
Let's say that I could already see the end result. See, I think Satan already knew the end result. I really think he did, and that's why he fought me all the way, because he could see the end result, and if he could destroy me before there, he'd have me. But let's just say God showed me the end result. Let's just say God said, "Okay, Jackie, you're going to go to trial in 10 months, but it's going to be okay because I'm going to walk down and he's going to be free and everything's going to be fine." Would my faith be where it's at today?
No, you wouldn't have learned what you know now.
I had to go through 10 months of just struggling. I call it the valley of the shadow of death, because to me that's what it was. You know, it's just going through that valley of the shadow of death. But you know, even after that wonderful experience that I just told you about, let me tell you what Satan's very last attack on me was. This was, come Monday, we're going to court. It's Saturday. Sunday's one day before court, and that's Easter Sunday. But this is Saturday. This is the last meeting. The attorneys are having, we've got a defense attorney now. It's not the real estate.
You don't have the
But
real estate
the real estate guy is still in the picture. He was right there with us all along. Yes, he was. You know, in fact, after it was over, him and Jason, when you look back, if you look back and you see any of the news stuff, you'll see he was the first one that grabbed Jason and was hugging him. But we had the best defense attorney money could buy. But let me tell you something. He couldn't give us anything.
That's right.
And it's like I have said in Georgia Justice, what do you do when money has no value?
Right.
It's not going to buy you nothing.
Right.
It doesn't mean nothing. It's not going to do anything for you. You might as well just burn it. And your innocence is not enough.
Right.
What are you going to do when money has no value and your innocence is not enough? You've got to go somewhere.
Yeah.
Well, this is the only place I could find to go, because in here, God told me, here's what God said: "Put not your trust in man, put your trust in me, for I am your defense."
That's right.
I can take the devices of the wicked and I can make them to non-effect. I can take the crooked way and I can make it straight.
Right.
I can do supernatural stuff. So, you know, I'm a believer, so I believe God. But what happened was when my son and his wife were in this very last meeting on Saturday, they come back to my house to tell me this. Now, Mama, we just had our last meeting, and they're preparing us, to go into court on Monday. But they have some advice for you. I said, okay, what is their advice for me? Don't bring your Bible to court. I said, oh, no, you didn't just say don't bring my Bible to court. Yeah. I said, Jason, I can't live without my Bible. You know it's my life support. You know I'm hooked up. You know I can't go in that courtroom without it. You know I can't do that. But how can I not go? How can I not be there for you? How can I not? I wasn't there for you when this happened. And, so many times I said, if I'd just been there, but I got to be there now. I got to be there.
Right.
So I didn't say another word to Jason. He had enough on him. Lord knows he had enough on him. So I just took it right on into my prayer closet too. I said, God, you know what I'm up against. I said, you tell me. Because they're saying, you take your Bible to court. There's 12 jurors. One of them's an atheist. They see you sitting out there with a Bible. And they take that opinion and they hold, because of their unbelief, they take that opinion and put it on your son. That one could send your son to prison for 30 years. Right. And if you think about it, that's very true. Yeah. And in reality, there may have been 6 atheists.
They could have.
In reality, if we want to get down, there may have been more than that on it. I mean, but who knows? You don't know. You don't know. That's the thing. You don't know. But don't God say, go on the unseen and not the seen? That's what faith is. Yeah. But, when I went in my prayer closet, I said, what do you want me to do, God? I can't have the weight of this on my shoulders, on me taking my Bible in there and sending my son to prison. I can't do this, God. I can't. And, and he said, well, all this stuff you've been telling everybody, you claiming this miracle, you're going to get this miracle, you've read all these miracles, you want yours, but yet you don't believe them enough. Yeah. Enough. 100%.
That's right.
100%. And I said, I am so sorry. I am so sorry. I had to apologize to God. I had to apologize. Do you ever have to apologize?
Oh,
I had to apologize
Every day.
to God.
Yeah.
I remember one night, it was like July, maybe a month after this happened. It was hot outside. But I remember going out into my driveway, and I remember with my face bowed down, and I'm telling you, my face was literally in the cement on the driveway, because before I got down, I looked up and I saw the stars and the moon, a beautiful night, and I just got down and started crying into the pavement. God help us, God help us, God help us. And many nights I did this, but praying. But when I got up, God once again made me look up, and when I looked up, I saw the stars and the moon, and I'm telling you what he said to me, Dante. He said, Jackie, look around you. I created this whole world in 6 days. And on the 7th, I was caught up. I rested. But you seem to think that this thing with Jason is so off course that I can't fix it and I can't straighten it out. And that's when I had to get back down and say, please forgive me. Please forgive me. I know you can. Yeah. Many times, but that's faith building. Yeah. If you look back, that's building the faith of where it's got to get, So what happened was I had to make a decision. Am I going to take my Bible or am I not? And to me, that's just a no-brainer. I mean, if you're going to have faith 100%, that is a no-brainer. I went right on in there, because they didn't say it. If we don't get a miracle, the attorney said, if we don't get a miracle, it's not a matter of if he's going home. It's just how long he's going away.
Right.
So I just said, I would rather take my chances offending a juror than to take my chances offending God. Right. So I went right on into the courtroom. And now you could do that, and you could hide it, so none of them could see it,
Say, see, God,
or
still brought it.
Put you something on top of it. But it's here, and I'm holding it. Yeah. But I didn't do that.
Right.
I kept it out, and I kept it in Psalms, And the whole time this thing was going on, and I was started hyperventilating.
Were you paying attention to the trial, or were you just buried into the Word?
Both.
Yeah.
But something? That was one time I was not confused. When I think back, I am so glad you asked me that, because praise the Lord. How much I've told you when you need to think the clearest, you're most confused. And you would think being in that courtroom with this thing starting up would be when you would be the most confused and need to think the clearest. Mm-hmm. I heard every word they were saying, and I heard every word he was saying, both at the same time. Is that amazing?
That's wonderful.
All at the same time. But let me tell you something, and I know that because every time this prosecutor would get up there and literally just take my son to a place that was such a far-fetched place from the truth, I would just look down, you know, and he would give me something just for that moment.
Exactly.
He would tell me, put not your trust in man, you know, I'm going to take care of this thing,
Right.
you know, don't, it's going to be okay. You're going to be fine. That's what sustained me.
Right.
That's what kept me from screaming out, that's not true. You know, oh, well, they come after your child. You know, you
want to
know
get up
that's
there and
not
get
true.
their face.
But they have done said, you utter a noise, you're out of here.
Right.
And I didn't want to be out of there.
Right.
I had to be there for my son. So this is what sustained me. But let me tell you something. It sustained my son. Because let me tell you something. That thing, my poor child, seeing him sitting down there at that table, I would have to go through, and when God would give me something, I would have to tear the page out. I had file folders, and I had to tear that out. I had to put it in a file folder and give it to the attorney and say, take it to my son. And I was doing this constantly, take it to my son.
Right.
And it was just stuff down there to keep him hopeful that God is going to come through on this thing for him. You know, because let me tell you something. I don't know if you know it, Dante, Paul. He wasn't charged with just felony murder. Right. He was charged with felony murder, 3 counts aggravated assault, and 1 count of a firearm. So 4 of them would have sent him to prison.
Right.
The only one that wouldn't have was possession of a firearm. I mean, he has a license. I don't know if they were coming up with anything they could, you know. And, you know, but let me tell you, what happened, what unfolded in that courtroom was a true miracle. And every person there that knew us, that knew about all this, knew that it was a miracle.
Now, how long was the trial? 4 days?
Yeah, it started on Monday and it ended on Thursday. And, you know, the other two guys that testified that were down there, alleged copper theft, that was never proven either anyway, because all this happened before they ever got out of the van, except when Jason, you know. So at this point, the copper theft was just not even part of the picture anymore. It was different now. So those 2 guys, they took the stand. But let me tell you, they lived together for 10 months, these 2 guys. Jason and his father-in-law, Billy, had not even been able to see each other, nothing for 10 months. No contact. And neither one of them had ever tried to break that. They kept it the way it was supposed to be.
Right.
But when the 2 that lived together took the stand, everything they said contradicted each other. You know, and I started thinking to myself, God, what are you doing? And I started looking at my Bible, and it was something about confounding their thoughts, confusing their tongues. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm seeing this before my very eyes, you know? I mean, I was seeing it in action, and it was just, nobody could believe it. It was totally unbelievable. And everything just started turning. You know, it was like the dominoes started falling.
Right.
And truth was emerging for the first time.
When that verdict come down, I know you had to be relieved, but were you surprised at all? Or you knew that it was going to be
Let me tell you about when the verdict came down, because before the verdict came down, and when the case was over and they went into deliberations, they went into deliberations. But before that, I have to tell you about my son's testimony. He was at my house on Easter Sunday, and he was in the headlines of the newspaper. The murder trial starts tomorrow, and I just fell down beside my bed and started giving, Lord, give me something to give my son to get him through this day, because they said 90% of it was going to rest on his shoulders, his testimony. Right. And God did. He gave me, I think it's Isaiah 51:15, that I'll put my words in your mouth, cover you under the shadow of my hand. Right. And I tore it out, gave it to him, forgot about it. But when my son took that stand, his testimony was just so truthful, so flawless. So, I mean, he just looked jurors face to face. He just told the truth, and it was beautiful. But still, you don't know what is going to come back out of jury deliberation. And they went out and...
How long did they deliberate?
They went out like on 3 or 4 o'clock one afternoon. I thought surely they'd come right back. They didn't. At 6 o'clock, the judge came back and said, y'all just go on home. We'll start up again 9 o'clock in the morning. You don't know where it's going now.
Right.
If he was innocent, why didn't they just come on back? Right. But it didn't. So it went on back the next day, all day long. About 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I couldn't take it anymore. So I got all the praying people, the ones that I knew could get prayers through. And I took them all out, and we got outside. There was a bench, and I just fell down on my face before God. I converted it to an altar, and everybody just joined around, and we just started crying out to God. I mean, we just literally started crying out to God. Help us. Right. This is our last chance. Please. I mean, we're begging, we're pleading. And about that time, when I got up, I saw one of the attorneys come in. And I thought, oh, Lord, he thinks we're so crazy. I know he thinks we are so crazy, you know. But he didn't say anything. He stopped for a minute, like silence, you know, and let us finish, you know. But I'm going to tell you something. I now know, I did not know then, that's the exact time the jury had come to a decision. See how it all went? Oh, God, it's so awesome. He's so awesome. Anyway, so we went back in the courtroom, you know, and I'm telling you, we were not in there long. And they came out and they said the jury's reached a verdict. And when they come in, you know, I felt numb. Just, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do anymore. You know, it's like you're coming to the end of something and you're just so numb. But when they tell my son to stand up, and he stood up, and he was between his two attorneys, I said it just reminded me so much of Jesus on the cross, with the two on the side, and his life is just hanging out over a cliff. Yeah. And that little piece of paper that they're taking up there is going to tell whether or not he goes home with us, he's a daddy again, a husband again, a son again, or he's gone for the next 30 years.
And the attorney told you if he was going to go to prison, he wouldn't have made it. They would have killed him.
The attorney
he wouldn't have made it through prison.
Told him that too in court. He's a judge.
So it wasn't only that he's going away for 30 years.
So that's another reason they didn't want him to go before a jury.
Right.
They said if they could get him before the judge and just get him to take the 3 years or so, they could try to get it at the county farm jail, and it would be more lighter stuff, and he would be with more people that are not just worst of the worst.
Yeah.
But if they couldn't get that for him, and he went on, and he was found guilty at our jury trial, that he would be put a place he would never survive. Yeah. So he wouldn't survive it, no. But I wouldn't survive it either. I mean, I just know I wouldn't have, you know. But anyway, but when that judge, when my son was standing there between those two attorneys, and that judge, here's what he said. When I read this verdict, I do not want to hear one word in this courtroom. If I hear one utterance, that he was going to start putting these charges on people. So I didn't know what to do anymore, you know. I didn't know what to do. So I just put my head down in my lap, and I then started hyperventilating because I could not breathe, and I couldn't gasp. I couldn't do nothing, and I couldn't breathe, and I was down. My head was on my lap, and my husband was down on top of me and just trying to get me to breathe, you know. And when he said felony murder, we, the jury, find the defendant not guilty. Well, at that point, I'm just, but you know, there's still 3 more charges that can send him. So how are you going to be real excited yet? You know? And then when I started hearing them say something about those assault charges, and the first one was not guilty, and the second not, and the third not, and then when they come back with that firearm not, and all 5 counts was innocent, let me tell you what happened. I will never forget this part. When I came up, all I could do was look straight into the heavens and hold my hands straight up. The only thing that I could form out of my mouth, I couldn't form a word. There wasn't no words.
Right.
The only utterance that would come out is, thank you, Jesus. Yeah. Thank you, Jesus. I mean, no sounds, nothing but, and a whisper. It was a whisper. Thank you, Jesus. Yeah. Like, thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Jesus. For 10 solid minutes, that was all that would come forth. And when I was able to look around and just look at people, it was all over the courtroom. Revival had broke out all over the courtroom. Attorneys crying. It was a revival meeting. Yeah. But the sad part is all the camera crews and the TV reporters, they weren't there to witness it. Yeah. They had followed the prosecutors and all them out, and that was the side they were continuously reporting on. So nothing good ever from that, you know.
Go ahead.
How did your church family support you during all this? You said that you didn't have really friends, but did your church family support you?
They did, and you know the only way they could. Every time I was in church for those 10 months, we were in the altar. We prayed. That was what they did. We got in the prayer for every meeting for all those 10 months and did nothing but cry out and beg and pray. That's how they supported me.
That's wonderful.
That's the only way people can support you.
Absolutely.
They got to go to God on your behalf.
Well, we're coming down on a break. Now, your son now, he's pastoring a church.
Yeah, he is.
That's wonderful.
Full time.
And you wrote these 2 books about the experience. The first is The Bridge Between Subblock A and The Miracle Is Psalm 91. And the other one is Georgia Justice, Journey to Faith. Isn't that great? And the first book, tell us just briefly about it.
The first book is the book 2 months after all this. I was sitting at my desk. I'm not an author. I'm not a writer. I don't know how. But I was sitting at my desk, and lives had started moving on, but I couldn't move forward. And God said, Jackie, what was the worst? I said, dear God, that was when Jason was in cell block A. And he said, write it down. He said, now what was the best? I said, well, God, that was when you showed up that miracle. He said, now what was that bridge that joined the two? I said, that was Psalm 91. He said, let's start writing. He started giving me a book. He just gave it to me.
And then the second.
Georgia Justice, I thought I was through everything, didn't want to do anymore. But he said, now, the bridge covers the tragedy, the trial, and the triumph. But now let's talk about the tears. See, the bridge talks
right.
about what the family went through. This talks about what I went through.
That's right.
I didn't want to put all this. This is the part I wanted to escape. This is the part I don't like talking about. I can talk about the trial, the jury, the judges, the attorneys, but this is the hard part, that what I went through for 10 months.
And now you can get these at
Tough stuff.
bridgetoamiracle.com.
All of it's www.bridgetoamiracle.com. Both of them are on there. Yeah,
Excellent.
all about them.
Well, thank you so much, Jackie, for
Thank
coming
you
to be
for
with us
having me.
tonight.
I just love sharing
This has been
God and what He
wonderful.
can do, and it's
It's
wonderful.
been a great hour,
Yeah.
and we got more exciting, testimonies coming in the second hour.